They say your life flashes before your eyes when you die. They're wrong. All I saw was a semi-truck, a wall of steel, and the end of everything I thought I knew. My name is Kelly Patterson, and I was 37 years old when the world ripped me apart. It happened on June 16, 2018, a Saturday that started like any other in my chaotic, overstretched life. I was a marketing analyst at a mid-sized firm in Atlanta, a single mom juggling deadlines and carpools, always running 5 minutes late to everything. That morning, I'd woken up to a sink full of dishes, a spilled cereal bowl courtesy of my 8-year-old daughter Emily, and a text from my ex-husband Mark reminding me he'd be late picking her up that weekend. Typical. By 3 p.m. I was still at the office, hunched over my desk, squinting at a spreadsheet that refused to balance. My boss had dumped the project on me last minute. A pitch for some fancy client who didn't care that I had a life outside those four walls. But I cared. Emily's parent-teacher conference was at 4 p.m., and I'd promised her I'd be there. She'd drawn me a picture that week, a stick-figure mom with a superhero cape, and left it on the fridge with a note. "Don't forget me, Mommy." I couldn't let her down again. I grabbed my purse, a battered leather thing I'd had since college, and checked my watch as I bolted for the door. 3:42 p.m. 18 minutes to make it across town. The school was 20 minutes away if traffic was kind, and on a 95 it rarely was. I cursed under my breath, fumbling with my keys as I reached my Toyota Corolla, a 2010 model with a dented bumper and a temperamental AC. The engine sputtered to life, and I peeled out of the parking lot, tires squealing on the asphalt. The radio crackled on, some bubblegum pop song about summer love. I slapped it off. I didn't need distractions, not now. The interstate loomed ahead, a concrete beast snarling with Saturday traffic. Families heading to malls, truckers hauling loads, everyone in their own little bubble. I merged into the flow, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. "Come on, Kelly," I muttered, gripping the wheel. "You've got this." The dashboard clock ticked to 3:48 p.m. I was cutting it close, too close. Ahead, the left lane opened up, a sliver of hope. If I could just slide in, I'd shave off a few seconds, maybe make it by the skin of my teeth. I flicked my blinker, checked my side mirror, and swung the wheel. That's when I heard it. A horn, loud and guttural like a beast waking up. My head snapped right. A semi-truck, silver and monstrous, towered in my blind spot, barreling down at 70 miles an hour. I'd misjudged it. Oh God, I'd misjudged it bad. Panic seized me. I yanked the wheel back, desperate to correct, but the Corolla had other plans. The tires shrieked, a high-pitched wail that clawed at my skull. The car spun, a dizzying whirl of gray and glass, and I felt my stomach flip like I was on some nightmare carnival ride. Then impact. The truck slammed into my driver's side door with the force of a freight train. Metal crumpled like paper, glass exploded inward, and my body took the hit full on. My ribs snapped, I heard them, a sickening crack, crack, crack. My chest caved, air whooshing out in a scream I couldn't voice. The steering wheel punched into my sternum, and my head smashed against the window, a burst of white-hot pain blinding me. Blood filled my mouth, coppery and warm. The noise was apocalyptic. Steel grinding, glass shattering, a roar that swallowed the world. I saw Emily's face, those big brown eyes, that gap-toothed smile, then nothing. Darkness. Cold, empty, infinite. My heart stopped. My brain flatlined. The paramedics would later say I was clinically dead for 9 minutes, trapped in that mangled wreck on I-95, blood pooling under me while strangers pried the door open. 9 minutes. But I didn't stay dead. And what happened in that stretch of time wasn't just a glitch in my brain or a hallucination from oxygen deprivation. It was real, more real than anything I'd ever known. It was a glimpse beyond the grave, a warning carved in light and fire, and a truth so big it's still shaking me to my core. Because those 9 minutes didn't just bring me back, they gave me a mission. Something's coming, something massive, and it's racing toward us faster than we can imagine. 2025 isn't just a year on the calendar. It's a deadline. Death isn't sleep. It's not peace either, not at first. It's like someone flipped a switch, and suddenly you're more awake than you've ever been. I don't know how long I floated in that void. Seconds? Days? Time didn't mean anything there. Just a blank slate, a nothingness that pressed against me like deep water. I wasn't scared, though. Not yet. I wasn't anything, no pain, no panic, just gone. Then it changed. Not a jolt. Not a bang, but a slow unraveling, like a blindfold slipping off, or a fog lifting from a windshield after a long night. I didn't see a tunnel of light, no glowing path like those near-death stories you read in magazines at the dentist's office. Instead, it was subtler, stranger. A veil peeling back to show me something I'd never dreamed of. The pain disappeared first. One moment, my body was a war zone. Ribs splintered, lungs collapsed, skull throbbing like it had been cracked open with a hammer. The next, it was erased. Not dulled, not eased, completely wiped away, like it had never existed. I sucked in a breath, or thought I did. Did I even have lungs anymore? Was I still me? I was standing. That hit me next. My feet, or whatever passed for them, felt solid ground though I couldn't see it. The space around me stretched out forever, a boundless sea of light. Not the sterile fluorescence of an ER, but a warm golden glow that pulsed like a heartbeat. It wasn't just light, it was alive. I could feel it brushing against me, wrapping me up, whispering things I couldn't quite hear. Love, wisdom, something ancient and vast. I turned, or my awareness did, since I wasn't sure I had a body anymore. The expanse shimmered, endless in every direction, but it didn't feel empty. It felt full, brimming with something I couldn't name. Was this heaven? I'd grown up in a little Baptist church in rural Georgia, where Pastor Jim preached about golden streets and angel choirs. My mom used to drag me there every Sunday, her Bible worn thin from years of underlining verses. I'd half believed it as a kid, half doubted it as an adult. But this didn't match the flannel board stories from Sunday school. No gates, no harps, just this living light in me alone in it. Or so I thought. A ripple broke the stillness, a shift in the glow like a wave rolling toward shore. My chest tightened, a reflex from a heart that wasn't beating anymore. The light gathered, thickened, and formed a shape. A man. Tall, broad, but not solid like a person you'd pass on the street. He was woven from that same golden light, his edges soft, flickering like a flame caught in a breeze. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, not that I needed to. He stepped closer and I saw his eyes. Deep, endless, like staring into the night sky and finding every star looking back. They held me there, pinned me, and I felt stripped bare. Not judged, not shamed, but seen. Every messy, broken piece of me laid out like an open book. "Kelly," he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it filled everything. It wasn't just in my ears. It sank into my bones, my soul, every fragment of who I'd ever been. It was calm, steady, but powerful enough to shake the ground if he'd wanted. And I knew him. No doubt, no question. I'd have known him in a crowd of millions, in the dark, in a whisper. Jesus. He didn't look like the Jesus from my mom's old Bible illustrations. Long brown hair, blue eyes, a gentle smile. This Jesus was different. His skin was darker, weathered like he'd walked 1,000 dusty roads. His face was strong, sharp, but fluid, somehow hard to pin down, like trying to remember a dream. His hair was short, dark, curling at the edges, and his robe shimmered, not white but every color and none at once. But those eyes, those were the anchor. Compassion and authority swirled in them, a universe of knowing I couldn't fathom. "You have questions," he said. Not asking, telling. He was right. My mind was a storm. Emily, Mark, my parents, my life. Was I really dead? Was this forever? What about the people I'd left behind? I opened my mouth, or whatever I had now, and a single word slipped out, small and shaky. "Yes. You will return," he said, his voice unwavering. "Your story isn't over. But first, there are things you need to see. Truths you have to carry back." I wanted to ask what he meant, but before I could, the light around us twisted, bent like a canvas being painted in real time. The air hummed, alive with purpose, and I felt it, the beginning of something massive. Something that wasn't just about me, but about everyone. Something I'd never unsee. Time's a lie we tell ourselves to feel safe. But Jesus showed me it's not a line. It's a clock, and it's been ticking for 2,500 years. The space shifted, a seamless dance of light and motion. I didn't feel my feet move, but we were somewhere else, or the somewhere else came to us. Jesus stood beside me, his presence steady, grounding me in the chaos of what I was about to witness. "What you're about to see," he said, his voice cutting through the hum, "was given to my servant Daniel over 2,500 years ago. 3 truths buried in time, waking up now, right now in your world. They're not just history. There, what's next? The light sculpted a scene before me. A young man, barely out of his teens, kneeling on a stone floor. His wrists were bound with rough rope, his tunic ripped at the shoulder, dust clinging to his sweat-streaked face. But his eyes, they burned fierce and alive, staring at something beyond the walls of his prison. "This is Daniel," Jesus said, "taken from Jerusalem when Babylon crushed his people. A captive, a slave, but he was mine. He saw what others couldn't. Dreams. Visions. The shape of things to come." The air flickered and an angel appeared, not the chubby cherubs from Christmas cards, but a being of fire and light, towering over Daniel. Its wings weren't feathers but flames, its voice a rumble that shook the ground. It spoke, words I couldn't hear, but Jesus leaned in, his tone calm, like he was reading me a bedtime story. "Daniel 9, he said. 70 weeks. A roadmap for my people, for the world. Not weeks like your calendar, each one 7 years. 70 times 7. For 190 years, stretching from then to the end." The vision unfolded, a scroll hovering in the air, glowing with symbols and dates. Jesus traced them with his finger, and they flared brighter. 7 weeks, 49 years, to rebuild Jerusalem after the exile. 62 weeks, 434 years until I came the first time. That's 69 weeks total. 483 years. I frowned, trying to wrap my head around it. "You're saying this, predicted you?" He nodded, a faint smile softening his face. "It started in 457 BC. A Persian king, Artaxerxes, gave the order to restore Jerusalem. Count forward 483 years. Where do you land? Math wasn't my strong suit. I'd barely passed algebra in high school, but I could handle this. 27 AD? The year I began my work, he said, his eyes locking on mine. Not a guess. Exact. Down to the moment. I stared at him, my mouth dry. A prophecy from over 2 millennia ago had pinned his arrival to the year? I'd heard Bible stories growing up, but this was surgical precision. It wasn't faith, it was fact. But there's 1 week left, he said, his voice dropping, heavy with meaning. 7 years. The final piece. It's been paused for 2,000 years, my church's age, a gap of grace. But it's waking up. The vision shifted, wars flashed across the sky, cities crumbled, then a grand room appeared. Men in suits, leaders I didn't recognize, signed a document while cameras clicked. This starts it, Jesus said. A treaty with Israel. They'll call it peace, a breakthrough. But it's the trigger. The clock restarts. What happens then? I asked, my voice trembling. I pictured Emily, Mark, my parents, were they part of this? Tribulation, he said. 7 years. The first half will strain the world, wars, hunger, chaos. The second, the Great Tribulation, will shatter it. Worse than anything you've imagined. The light showed glimpses, earthquakes splitting roads, skies turning blood red, people screaming in streets I knew too well. Atlanta's skyline flickered, smoke rising from Peachtree Street. My stomach twisted. Why me? I said, almost pleading. Why show me this? Because you're here, he said, his hand resting on my shoulder, warm and firm. You're alive in this moment. The gap's closing your lifetime, Kelly. Tell them where they stand. Tell them to get ready. The scroll faded, but its weight pressed on me. A countdown I couldn't stop, ticking toward a future I wasn't sure I wanted to see. America, the world, we were all caught in it, whether we knew it or not. Monsters don't always growl. Sometimes they smile, shake your hand, and promise you the world right before they take it away. The light darkened, storm clouds rolling in where the golden glow had been. Thunder rumbled and waves crashed in the distance, a sea of shadows churning. For shapes clawed their way up from the water, beasts, grotesque and towering, each more terrifying than the last. Daniel saw these, Jesus said, his voice steady against the roar. 4 kingdoms. 4 powers that shaped your world. The first beast was a lion, golden and regal, wings ripping from its back like a predator ready to strike. Babylon, Jesus said. Next came a bear, massive and uneven, one paw raised, jaws dripping with blood. Persia. Then a leopard, sleek and deadly, forehead snarling in unison. Greece. Finally, a creature I couldn't name, iron teeth glinting, claws tearing the earth, a nightmare of strength and destruction. Rome. I shivered, pulling my arms, or what felt like them, around myself. Their history, right? Done. The first 3, yes, he said. But the 4th, its roots run deep. It's still here in pieces, waiting. And from it comes the worst. The vision narrowed, 10 horns sprouted from the iron beast, jagged and cruel, like a crown of thorns gone wrong. Then a smaller horn pushed up, slow and deliberate, uprooting 3 others with a sickening crunch. It grew, twisting, and I saw them, eyes, human and cunning, staring out from its tip. A mouth opened, wide and boastful, spitting words that hit me like fists. "The Antichrist," Jesus said, his tone grave. Daniel saw him in chapter 7. "He rises from Rome's shadow, its echoes in your world. He'll topple 3 kings, mock me, hunt my people, rewrite your laws, your time." The horn morphed, a man now, tall and magnetic, his smile disarming. He stood on a stage, crowds roaring his name, flags waving in a wind I couldn't feel. His voice was smooth, promising peace, prosperity, a new era. But behind him, shadows moved, chains, cages, a world bending under his grip. "He won't come as a tyrant," Jesus said. "Not at first. He's a savior to them. After chaos, wars, markets crashing, fear everywhere, he'll step in. Solutions. Unity. Lies." The vision flashed, a mark, small but unmistakable, branded on hands and foreheads. A barcode, a chip, something digital and cold. "Without it, they can't buy," Jesus said. "Can't sell. Can't live." Revelation 13 ties it to Daniel. He's Satan's puppet, armed with miracles, deceiving everyone. I thought of my life, credit cards, smartphones, the news screaming about global crises every night. "Is he here?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "In my time." "Not yet," Jesus said, his eyes narrowing. "But the ground's ready. 10 regions, 10 leaders, watch your world fracture. He'll take 3, then all." "It's close, Kelly." The man's eyes, those horn eyes, locked on me, piercing through the vision. I stumbled back, my breath, or whatever it was, catching. "He's that powerful?" "More than you know," Jesus said. "But not more than me. Don't fear him, know him. Warn them how he comes." The beast sank back into the sea, their growls fading, but the man's face lingered, burned into my mind. A shadow rising, and we were all in its path. Everything we build breaks eventually, empires, dreams, lives. But Jesus showed me something that doesn't. Something worth holding on to. The storm dissolved and the light softened, warm again, like sunrise after a long night. Jesus' face changed, less stern, more alive, a spark in his eyes that felt like hope. "There's more," he said. "After the dark, there's this." The vision reshaped, a giant statue rose before me, gleaming and proud. Its head was gold, chest silver, thighs bronze, legs iron, feet a shaky mix of iron and clay. It towered over the sea, a monument to power. Then a stone, small, rough, untouched by hands, shot from the void and struck its feet. The statue wobbled, cracked, and collapsed, dust swirling where it had stood. The stone grew, swelling into a mountain, then a range, filling the earth until nothing else remained. "Daniel 2, Jesus said. The kingdoms of man, Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome, and what you've built today. They rise, they rule, they fall. But this stone? My kingdom. It doesn't bend. It doesn't break. It ends them all." The mountain shimmered, a city of light unfurled across its slopes, streets bustling with people, laughter echoing where screams had been. No hospitals, no graves, no tears staining faces. "In the days of those kings," Jesus said, quoting words that burned in the air, "the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that'll never be destroyed. It'll crush every other power and stand forever." "Forever?" I said, my voice cracking. I couldn't picture it. Every empire I'd learned about in school, every superpower on the news, gone? "No wars," he said, his voice softening. "No sickness. No death. I'll rule it." Revelation 11 says the world becomes mine. God with his people, wiping every tear away. I saw Emily running through that city, her pigtails bouncing, no fear in her eyes. Mark beside her, smiling like he hadn't since our divorce. My parents, younger somehow, whole. No goodbyes. I asked, tears I couldn't feel prickling anyway. "None," he said, his gaze steady. "No pain, no loss, Revelation 21 promises it. But it's not for everyone. John 3 verse 3, you have to be born again through me to see it." The city glowed, unshakable, and I felt it, a hope I'd lost somewhere between late-night shifts and custody battles. Not a wish, but a rock-solid truth. "When does it come?" I asked. "After the 7 years," he said. "After him. I'll return, not in shadows, not in secret. Every eye will see me. The tribulation ends and this begins." The mountain stood firm, a promise carved in stone, and I clung to it. "Tell them this too," Jesus said. "They'll need it when the dark comes." I nodded, overwhelmed but certain. Death had stripped me bare, but now I had something to carry back. A light brighter than the crash, a hope stronger than the chaos ahead. Coming back to life isn't a gentle fade-in. It's a punch to the chest, a scream in your ears, and a promise you can't shake. The light vanished, or I did. One second I was standing in that golden expanse, Jesus' voice still echoing in my soul, the mountain of his kingdom towering before me. The next I was slammed back into darkness, cold and jagged. Pain roared through me, a tidal wave crashing over every nerve. My ribs burned, my head throbbed, and my lungs clawed for air that wouldn't come easy. I was back. Voices broke through the haze, sharp, urgent, overlapping. "She's got a pulse," someone shouted. "Get the stretcher, move, move." Metal groaned, a screeching protest as the jaws of life pried my Toyota Corolla apart. I couldn't see them, not yet, but I felt hands rough and quick pulling at me. A mask pressed over my face, oxygen hissing into my mouth, bitter and sterile. "Stay with us, ma'am," a woman said, her tone clipped but steady. "You're gonna be okay." Was I? My eyes fluttered open, blurry and stinging. Lights flashed, red, blue, white, cutting through the dusk. The highway stretched around me, a chaos of stopped cars, honking horns and distant sirens. My car, or what was left of it, lay crumpled like a tin can, the driver's side a mangled mess of steel and glass. The semi-truck loomed nearby, its front end dented but intact, the driver pacing with his hands on his head. "Emily," I croaked, my voice a rasp. No one heard me over the clamor. I tried to move, to sit up, but pain pinned me down, a knife twisting in my chest. My watch dangled from my wrist, cracked but ticking. 4:03 p.m. I'd been gone 9 minutes. 9 minutes that felt like eternity. The paramedics lifted me onto a stretcher, straps snapping tight across my broken body. "BP's dropping," a man said, his gloved hands pressing a gauze pad to my forehead. "She's bleeding out, let's go." The stretcher jolted as they rushed me to the ambulance, tires squealing as we peeled away. Inside, the world shrank to beeps and needles. And 4 stabbed into my arm, cold liquid racing through my veins. The woman, her name tag read Sarah, leaned over me, her brown eyes sharp with focus. "What's your name?" she asked. "Kelly," I managed, coughing. Blood flecked my lips. "Kelly Patterson." "Good," Sarah said, forcing a smile. "Stay awake, Kelly. You've got people waiting for you. Emily, Mark, my parents." Their faces swam in my mind, anchoring me as the ambulance rocked. But behind them loomed something else, the visions, the prophecies, Jesus' words. "Tell them. I wasn't just back. I was back with a purpose, a weight I could feel even through the pain." At the hospital, it was a blur of white coats and steel trays. Female, 37 MVA, multiple fractures, internal bleeding. A doctor barked. Machines hummed, cold gel smeared across my chest for an ultrasound. "She was flatlined for 9 minutes, Sarah told them, her voice low. "No brain activity. Then she just came back." "A miracle," another doctor muttered, shaking his head as he stitched a gash on my scalp. I wanted to laugh or cry. A miracle? Sure, if miracles came with visions of beasts and a countdown to the end. But I couldn't speak, not yet. They wheeled me into surgery, lights glaring overhead, and as the anesthesia pulled me under, I heard his voice again, soft but firm. "You will return." When I woke, it was to sterile walls and a steady beep. My body was a battlefield, bandages, tubes, a cast on my left arm, but I was alive. The clock on the wall read 9:47 p.m. Hours had passed, and the world hadn't stopped. But I had something it didn't. 9 minutes that changed everything. You don't just walk away from death and pick up where you left off. It clings to you, and so does everyone else. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and regret. I lay there, propped up by pillows, staring at the ceiling tiles as machines tracked my pulse. My left arm throbbed under the cast, my ribs ached with every shallow breath, and a headache pulsed behind my eyes. But I was alive, impossibly, improbably alive. The door creaked open and Emily burst in, her sneakers squeaking on the linoleum. "Mommy!" she cried, her voice a mix of relief and fear. She threw herself at the bed, stopping short when she saw the tube snaking from my arm. Her brown eyes, Mark's eyes, were wide, wet with tears. "Hey baby," I said, my throat raw. I reached for her with my good hand, and she grabbed it, her fingers small and warm. "You're okay," she whispered like she didn't believe it. "I'm okay," I lied, forcing a smile. "Just a little banged up." Mark followed her in, his broad frame filling the doorway. He looked like he hadn't slept, dark circles under his eyes, his sandy hair a mess. We'd been divorced 2 years, a slow unraveling of arguments and silences. But he was still Emily's dad, still the guy who'd once promised me forever. "Jesus, Kelly," he said, his voice rough. "They said you were gone. 9 minutes." "I know," I said, meeting his gaze. "I was." He frowned, stepping closer. "What do you mean you were?" Before I could answer, my parents arrived. Mom clutching a tissue, Dad trailing behind with his cane. "Oh, honey," Mom sobbed, rushing to my side. She was 65, her hair a silver bob, but she moved like a woman half her age when it came to her kids. "We thought we'd lost you." Dad, gruff as ever, nodded. "Damn truck drivers," he muttered. "Should have stayed off that damn highway." "I'm here," I said, squeezing Mom's hand. "I'm not going anywhere." But I wasn't the same Kelly they'd known that morning. I could feel it, the weight of those 9 minutes pressing on me, the visions flickering at the edges of my mind. Emily climbed onto the bed, careful not to jostle me, and nestled against my side. "I missed you," she said, her voice muffled. "I missed you too," I said, kissing her forehead. But my eyes drifted to Mark, still hovering, his brow furrowed. "Kelly," he said, lowering his voice so Emily wouldn't hear. "The doctors, they said it's a miracle. No brain damage, nothing permanent. 9 minutes without oxygen? That doesn't happen." I swallowed, the truth clawing at my throat. "It wasn't just luck," I said. "I saw something, Mark. I went somewhere." He stared at me, skepticism warring with worry. "What are you talking about?" "Later," I said, glancing at Emily. "Not now." The nurse came in then, checking my chart, shooing everyone out. "She needs rest," she said firmly. They left reluctantly. Emily blowing me a kiss, Mom promising to bring chicken soup, Mark lingering with a look I couldn't read. Alone again, I closed my eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. Instead, I saw him, Jesus, his eyes piercing, his voice clear. "Tell them." How could I? My family barely held together as it was. How do you tell your kid, your ex, your parents that the world's on a countdown to chaos? The TV in the corner flickered on CNN, muted but subtitled. A headline scrolled, "Middle East talks gain traction. Israel, Saudi Arabia, a historic deal." My breath caught. A treaty with Israel. Jesus's words echoed. It's the trigger. I wasn't just back. I was back in a world already shifting toward what I'd seen. The world doesn't wait for you to catch up. It keeps spinning, and sometimes you see the cracks before anyone else. Days blurred into weeks. The hospital released me after 10 days. Broken ribs, a fractured arm, a concussion, but no lasting damage. A medical anomaly, the neurologist called it, scribbling notes while I nodded blankly. They didn't know what I knew. They couldn't. Mark drove me home, Emily chattering in the backseat about her teacher's praise for her art project. Our house, a modest 2-bedroom in Decatur, felt smaller somehow, the air thick with normalcy I couldn't settle into. The fridge still held Emily's drawing, the superhero mom staring back at me. I wasn't that mom anymore. "You sure you're okay?" Mark asked, unloading my bag in the living room. "You've been quiet." "I'm fine," I said, avoiding his eyes. "Just tired." He didn't push, but I could tell he didn't buy it. He stayed longer than he needed to, fixing a leaky faucet I hadn't mentioned, lingering over coffee. "Call if you need anything," he said finally, heading out. "I will," I lied. That night I sat on the couch, Emily asleep upstairs, the TV droning. The news was relentless. Stock markets wobbling, protests in Europe, a heat wave scorching the Midwest. Then it came again. Israel's PM to meet Arab leaders next month. Peace talks escalate. My pulse quickened. I grabbed my phone, scrolling X for more. Posts flooded in, diplomats optimistic, skeptics warning of hidden agendas. One tweet stuck out. "If this deal goes through, it's the biggest shift since '48. Buckle up." I set the phone down, my hands shaking. The treaty. The clock. It wasn't just a vision, it was happening. The next morning, I tried to ease back into routine. Coffee, toast, Emily's backpack check. But the world felt off-kilter. At the grocery store, the cashier grumbled about prices. Milk up 50 cents, eggs $1 more. "Everything's going to hell," she said, scanning my bread. On the radio driving home, a pundit ranted about digital currencies, China's yuan, America's dollar, all merging into some global system. Can't buy, can't sell, Jesus had said. I called my mom that afternoon needing something familiar. You watching the news? I asked. Too depressing, she said. All this Middle East nonsense won't last. Never does. Maybe, I said, but doubt not at me. Mom, what if it's bigger than that? She laughed, soft and dismissive. You sound like your granddad with his end times talk. Rest up, honey. You've been through enough. I hung up, staring at the wall. Granddad, Papa Joe, had been a fire and brimstone type, always quoting Revelation over Sunday supper. I'd rolled my eyes then. Now I wished I'd listened. That night, Emily woke screaming. A nightmare about a crash, me gone. I held her, rocking her back to sleep, but her words haunted me. Don't leave again, Mommy. I wouldn't, not by choice. But the cracks were spreading, and I couldn't unsee them. Truth's a heavy thing. It's heavier when you're not sure anyone will believe you, or if they should. A month after the crash, I couldn't keep it in anymore. The visions burned behind my eyes, Jesus' voice a constant hum in my head. Tell them. But who? How? I wasn't a preacher, wasn't even a regular at church anymore. I was just Kelly, mom, ex-wife, survivor. I started with Mark. He came over to drop off Emily's soccer gear, and I caught him at the door. Can we talk? I asked. Sure, he said, stepping inside. What's up? We sat at the kitchen table, coffee steaming between us. Emily was at a friend's house, the silence thick. I took a breath. When I died those 9 minutes, I saw something. He leaned back, arms crossed. Saw something. Jesus, I said, the words sounding strange in my mouth. He showed me things. About the future. The world. Mark's jaw tightened, his skeptic's face kicking in. Kelly, you were out. No oxygen. People see stuff. It wasn't a dream, I cut in, sharper than I meant. It was real. He showed me prophecies, Daniel's prophecies. A treaty with Israel, a guy called the Antichrist, a kingdom coming after it all falls apart. He stared, then laughed, a short, nervous bark. Come on. You're serious. Dead serious, I said, holding his gaze. It's happening, Mark. Look at the news. Peace talks, economic shifts. It's lining up. He rubbed his face, exhaling hard. You hit your head pretty bad. Maybe? Don't, I snapped. Don't make this a concussion thing. I know what I saw. Okay, he said, softer. Say it's real. What do you want me to do? Believe me, I said. Help me figure this out. For Emily. He didn't answer right away, just sipped his coffee, eyes distant. I don't know, Kel. This is a lot. I know, I said, my voice breaking. But I can't carry it alone. He left without a yes or no, promising to think it over. I didn't push, he'd always needed time to process. But the weight didn't lift. Next, I tried Mom and Dad. Over dinner at their place, meatloaf and mashed potatoes, comfort food, I spilled it all. Mom's fork froze midair. Honey, you sure this isn't trauma talking? It's not, I said. I saw him. He told me to warn people. Dad grunted, cutting his meat. Sounds like Joe's old rants. End of days, mark of the beast. Thought we raised you past that. Maybe Papa Joe wasn't crazy, I said. Maybe he was right. They exchanged a look, concern, not conviction. Get some rest, Mom said finally. We'll pray about it. Emily was last. One night, tucking her in, she asked, why do you go away, Mommy? I didn't mean to, I said, brushing her hair back. But while I was gone, I met someone. He said big things are coming, good and bad. We need to be ready. Like superheroes? She asked, sleepy. Kind of, I said, smiling despite myself. The best kind. She nodded, drifting off, and I wondered how much she'd understand when the time came. Telling them didn't ease the burden, it sharpened it. But I'd started and there was no going back. The world whispers its secrets if you listen. Problem is, most people don't want to hear. By fall 2018, I was back at work, half days, pushing papers while my body healed. But my mind was elsewhere, tuned to a frequency no one else seemed to hear. The news became my obsession, TV, X, radio, anything I could get. Every headline felt like a thread pulling me back to those 9 minutes. The Middle East talks dominated, Israel, Saudi Arabia, the UAE inching toward a deal. Historic, pundits called it. Unprecedented. I saw Jesus' face, his warning, the trigger. On X, debates raged, some hailed it as peace, others smelled a setup. A pastor I followed posted, Daniel 9 verse 27, watch for the covenant. My skin prickled. Then the economy stuttered. A market dip in October, nothing catastrophic, but enough to spook Wall Street. Crypto spiked, cash faded, and banks pushed digital IDs. Can't buy, can't sell. I dug into it. Articles about a global currency framework. Whispers of a unified system. At the store, my card glitched twice, the cashier muttering about new protocols. Mark noticed my fixation. One night, picking up Emily, he cornered me. "You're glued to that TV. What's going on?" "It's starting," I said, showing him a headline. UN proposes 10 region economic zones. 10 leaders, Mark. Like he said. He frowned, skimming it. Coincidence? Maybe, I said. But what if it's not? He didn't argue, just took Emily and left. I kept watching. Protests flared to France, Brazil, here in Atlanta. Gas hit $5 a gallon. A church downtown held a prepare seminar, end time stuff. I went, sitting in the back, heart pounding as the preacher quoted Daniel 7. "The little horn's coming," he said. "Look around." Driving home, I passed a billboard, "One world, one future," some tech conference ad. Innocent enough, but it chilled me. The static was loud now, signs everywhere if you knew where to look. That night, I dreamed of the beasts, the horn's eyes staring through me. I woke gasping, Jesus' voice clear, "Warn them." The world wasn't ready, but I had to be. Chapter 11, The Reluctant Messenger. Speaking the truth doesn't make you a hero. Sometimes it just makes you the crazy lady everyone wishes would shut up. Winter 2018 crept into Atlanta, the air crisp and the trees bare. I was back to full days at work, pushing through the ache in my ribs and the fog in my head. Life marched on. Emily's soccer games, grocery runs, bills piling up, but I couldn't shake the hum of those 9 minutes. Jesus' voice was a constant whisper, "Tell them." I tried with my family, but their doubt gnawed at me. If they didn't believe, who would? I started small. At work, over lunch in the break room, I tested the waters with Jen, my cubicle neighbor. She was a chatterbox, always up on the latest gossip, so I figured she'd bite. "Hey Jen," I said, picking at my sandwich. "You ever think about the end of the world?" She laughed mid-sip of her Coke. "Like zombies? Or that Mayan calendar thing?" "No," I said, lowering my voice. "Like Bible stuff, prophecies, things happening now." Her eyebrows shot up. "You going all preacher on me, Kelly?" "Maybe," I said, forcing a grin. I had this experience. After the crash. Saw some wild stuff, peace deals, the bad guy coming, the works. She stared, then smirked. "You sure you didn't just watch too much Netflix while you were laid up?" I shrugged, letting it drop. But her words stung. Was I crazy? That night, I dug out my mom's old Bible from a box in the closet, leather-worn, pages yellowed. I flipped to Daniel, the words jumping out like they'd been waiting. 70 weeks, a covenant, a little horn. It wasn't Netflix. It was real. The next step was harder. Sunday morning, I took Emily to Cornerstone Baptist, the church I'd grown up in. Pastor Jim was still there, older now, his sermon softer but sharp when it mattered. After the service, I lingered as the crowd thinned, Emily tugging at my hand. "Can I talk to you?" I asked him. "Of course, Kelly," he said, his smile crinkling his eyes. "Heard about your accident. Miracle you're here." "That's the thing," I said, glancing at Emily, who'd run off to chase a friend. "It wasn't just a miracle. I died for 9 minutes. And I saw Jesus." His smile faded, replaced by a keen look. "Saw him?" "Yeah," I said, my heart racing. "He showed me prophecies, Daniel stuff. A treaty with Israel, the Antichrist, a kingdom after it all. Said I had to tell people." Pastor Jim leaned back, stroking his chin. "That's a heavy load, Kelly. You sure it wasn't?" "Not a dream," I cut in, sharper than I meant. "I know what I saw. It's happening, look at the news." He nodded slowly. "Middle East talks, yeah. Economic shifts too. I've been preaching Daniel lately, folks don't like hearing it, but it's there. Will you help me?" I asked. "I don't know how to do this." He studied me, then sighed. "Bring it to the Wednesday prayer group. Small crowd, safe place. We'll see what they think." Wednesday came fast. The group, 10 or so regulars, mostly older, met in the church basement, folding chairs creaking under them. I stood, hands sweaty, and spilled it all. The crash, the light, Jesus, the visions. Faces shifted, some curious, some skeptical. One lady clutching her purse like I might rob her. "Sounds like Revelation," a man named Earl said, his voice gruff. "Beast and all that." "Or head injury," muttered Mrs. Carter, the purse clutcher. Pastor Jim stepped in. "Let's pray on it. Kelly's been through something, maybe God's speaking." They prayed, but I felt the doubt. Driving home, Emily asleep in the back, I wondered if I'd made a mistake. Telling them didn't lift the weight, it piled on more. But I couldn't stop. The clock was ticking and I was its reluctant messenger. Truth doesn't just test the world, it tests the people you love most. And sometimes they break before it does. Christmas 2018 should have been simple: lights on the tree, Emily's wish list, mom's pecan pie. Instead, it was a battlefield. I couldn't keep the visions locked up anymore, and my family was the first casualty. It started at Mom and Dad's the day before Christmas Eve. Emily was upstairs, lost in a new coloring book, while I helped Mom in the kitchen. The TV hummed in the background, CNN again, Israel Peace Summit set for spring, and I couldn't hold it in. "Mom," I said, chopping onions, "it's happening. The treaty Jesus showed me." She paused, spatula hovering over the skillet. "Kelly, not this again." "It's real," I said, my voice rising. "The news, the economy, it's all lining up." Dad shuffled in, hearing the edge in my tone. "What's this now?" "She's on about her visions," Mom said, exasperated. "Thinks the world's ending." "Not ending," I corrected, setting the knife down. "Changing. There's a 7-year thing, tribulation. Then something better." Dad snorted, easing into his recliner. "Your granddad filled your head with that nonsense. Joe, be proud, but it's still nonsense." "It's not," I said, heat creeping up my neck. "I died, Dad. I saw Jesus. He told me." "You saw something," Mom cut in, gentle but firm. "You were hurt, honey. Brains do funny things." "I wasn't imagining it." I snapped, louder than I meant. Emily poked her head in, eyes wide, and I softened. "Sorry, baby. Go finish your picture." She hesitated, then scampered off. Mom sighed. "We're worried, Kelly. You're not yourself." "Maybe I'm more myself than ever," I said, quieter. "I can't pretend this didn't happen." They didn't argue more, but the silence was worse. Christmas Eve was tense, gifts exchanged, carols sung, but their glances said it all: she's losing it. Mark was next. He came over Christmas Day to drop off Emily's presents: a bike, a dollhouse, more than we'd agreed on. Trying to win her back? I teased, but my heart wasn't in it. "Gotta spoil her sometime," he said, grinning. Then he saw my face. "You okay?" "No," I admitted, pulling him aside while Emily tore into wrapping paper. "I told Mom and Dad. They think I'm crazy. But it's getting worse, the signs. I need you to hear me." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Kelly, I've listened. It's out there. You're scaring Emily with this." "I'm not," I said, defensive. "I'm protecting her. If this tribulation's coming." "Stop," he said, voice hard. "She's 8. She doesn't need apocalypse bedtime stories. She needs to know," I insisted. "We all do." He stepped back, jaw tight. "I don't want her caught up in this. If you keep pushing, I'll fight for custody." My stomach dropped. "You wouldn't." "I will if you're unstable," he said, softer but firm. "Think about her, Kelly." He left, the dollhouse half-assembled, and I sank onto the couch, trembling. Emily hugged me, oblivious. "Best Christmas ever," she said, and I forced a smile. But inside I was fracturing, torn between the truth I carried and the family I might lose. When you step into the light, some cheer, some jeer, and some just want you gone. I learned that fast. January 2019, I took a bigger leap. Pastor Jim called after New Year's, his voice cautious but warm. "Prayer group's buzzing about you," he said. "Some want you to speak Sunday night service. You up for it?" I hesitated. A handful of skeptics was one thing, a whole congregation was another. But Jesus's words burned. "Warn them." "Yeah," I said finally. "I'll do it." Sunday night, Cornerstone Baptist was packed, maybe 50 people, more than usual for a non-morning service. I stood at the pulpit, my notes shaking in my hands, Emily in the front row with Mom and Dad, who'd come reluctantly. Mark stayed home, his absence a silent protest. "I'm not a preacher," I started, my voice wobbly. "I'm just Kelly Patterson, Mom, desk jockey, crash survivor. But last June I died for 9 minutes. And I saw something." I told it all: the crash, the light Jesus, the 3 prophecies. The treaty clock, the Antichrist shadow, the kingdom's promise. I tied it to the news. Israel's talks, economic tremors, whispers of global zones. "It's not coming," I said. "It's here. We need to wake up." Silence first, then murmurs. Earl from prayer group clapped, loud and slow. "Amen," he said. A few nodded, older folks mostly, the ones who'd grown up on Revelation sermons. But others shifted, uneasy. Mrs. Carter stood, purse in hand. "This is fear-mongering," she said, loud enough for all. "We need hope, not doom." "It's both," I shot back. "The bad's coming, but there's good after." Jesus said. Jesus didn't tell you squat, a younger guy interrupted. Tom, a deacon's son. You're pushing your trauma on us. Pastor Jim stepped up, hands raised. Let's hear her out. She's got a right to speak. They let me finish, but the air was thick with tension. Afterward, a few thanked me. Earl, a quiet widow named Ruth. Keep talking, Ruth whispered. I believe you. But most slipped out, avoiding my eyes. Mrs. Carter cornered Pastor Jim, her voice carrying, she's unstable. This isn't right. Driving home, Mom broke the silence. You did your best, honey. But maybe tone it down. Tone it down, I said, gripping the wheel. The world's not toning down. They're scared, Dad said. You're asking a lot. I'm asking them to see, I said, tears stinging. Emily squeezed my arm quiet. The pushback hurt, but the believers, however few, kept me going. I wasn't alone. Not yet. Sometimes the signs aren't whispers, they're shouts. And when they hit, you can't look away. Spring 2019 brought chaos. The news didn't let up. Every day, another thread of the visions unraveled into reality. March hit with a market crash, not a dip, a plunge. Wall Street lost 20% in a week, pensions evaporated, and grocery lines stretched around blocks. Global recession, they called it, but X buzzed with darker takes. This is engineered. One system's coming. Then April, Israel's peace summit. Live on CNN, I watched the handshake, Israel's PM, Saudi prince, UAE reps, all smiles in Jerusalem. A new era, the anchor gushed. My heart stopped. The covenant. I grabbed my Bible, Daniel 9 verse 27 glaring back. He will confirm a covenant with many for 7 years. The clock wasn't just ticking, it was screaming. I called Mark, breathless. You see this? Yeah, he said, wary. Big deal, sure, but it's the start, I said. 7 years, Mark. Tribulation. He sighed. Kelly, it's politics. Not your prophecy. Watch, I said. It'll get worse. It did. May brought riots, food shortages sparked them, first in Europe, then here. Atlanta's streets filled with chants, tear gas, broken glass. Gas hit $6, then $7. Power grids flickered, blackouts rolling through suburbs. At work, Jen muttered about layoffs. End of the world, huh? She joked, but her eyes were scared. X exploded, conspiracy threads, Bible quotes, panic. A post went viral, 10 regions proposed at Union New World Order? I dug deeper, documents leaked, plans for economic zones, digital IDs mandatory by 2020. 10 horns, Jesus had said. I showed Pastor Jim, his face paling. Could be, he admitted. Pray, Kelly. Emily felt it too. One night, she climbed into my bed, trembling. School's weird, she said. Kids say bad stuff's coming. It might, I said, holding her. But we've got each other. And something bigger. The world tilted fast, hard. I wasn't imagining it anymore. The beasts were stirring and the horn was sharpening. When the storm hits, you pick a side. I didn't want to, but the world didn't give me a choice. Summer 2019, the cracks widened. Atlanta simmered to heat waves, outages, protests turning ugly. Work cut my hours, company bleeding cash, and I scrambled to cover rent. Emily's school sent notices, prepare for remote learning, unstable conditions. Normal was gone. Pastor Jim ramped up, Sunday sermons now Daniel heavy, pews fuller each week. We're in it, he said one night, voice shaking. Kelly's visions lining up. I spoke again, bolder now, the crowd split, half nodding, half glaring. Earl started a study group. Mrs. Carter quit the church, calling me a false prophet. Mark drew his line. July 4th, he showed up, face hard. Emily's staying with me, he said. This whatever you're doing, it's not safe. She's my daughter, I said, panic rising. You can't, I can, he said, pulling out papers. Emergency custody filing. You're obsessed, Kelly. She's scared. She's scared of the world, not me. I shouted. Look out there, riots, deals, it's all true. He shook his head. You're making it worse. I'm taking her tomorrow unless you drop this. I didn't. Next day, he came with a cop, temporary order granted. Emily cried, clinging to me. I'll fix this, I whispered, kissing her forehead. He drove off, her face pressed to the window, and I broke, sobbing on the porch, the Bible clutched to my chest. That night, the news flashed. Global Summit announces 10-zone plan economic unity by 2021. 10 horns. I called Pastor Jim, voice hoarse. It's here. Hold fast, he said. God's with you. I hung up, staring at Emily's empty room. The line was drawn, family lost, world tilting, but the truth stood firm. I'd warn who'd listen, no matter the cost. 2025 loomed and I was all in. Losing everything's one thing. Losing your kid? That's a fire you don't put out. You burn with it until you win her back. Fall 2019 was a wasteland. Emily gone, my house an empty shell, the world unraveling outside my windows. Atlanta felt like a city holding its breath. Mark had her, backed by that custody order, and I was left with nothing but the echoes of her laughter and a mission I couldn't abandon. I hired a lawyer, Sarah Klein, a sharp woman with a no-nonsense bob and a reputation for winning. My savings took a hit, but Emily was worth it. He's claiming instability, Sarah said, flipping through papers in her cramped office. Your accident, the religious talk, it's his ammo. We need to prove you're fit. I am, I said, fists clenched. He's scared of what I know, not me. She raised an eyebrow. What you know? I hesitated, then spilled it, the crash, the visions, the signs. She didn't laugh, just nodded. Keep that out of court, she said. Focus on Emily's stable home, steady job. That's what the judge cares about. I nodded, but inside I seethed. Stable? The world wasn't stable. Riots downtown, food rationing, blackouts weekly. How could I pretend otherwise? The hearing came fast, October 15th, a gray morning in a Fulton County courtroom. Mark sat across from me, Emily between us, her eyes darting like a trapped bird's. He looked tired, older, his lawyer whispering in his ear. My hands shook as Sarah argued my recovery, my job, my love for Emily. Mark's side fired back. She's fixated on doomsday prophecies, unstable, obsessive. The judge, a stern woman with gray streaks, peered over her glasses. Mrs. Patterson, explain this religious behavior. I took a breath, Jesus's voice steadying me. Tell them. I had an experience, I said, calm as I could. After the crash, I saw things, warnings about the future. I've shared them, yeah, but I'm not unstable. I'm a mom first. Emily's my world. She scribbled, face unreadable. Mark testified next. His voice cracked as he said, she's scaring her. I just want Emily safe. Emily spoke last, small and quiet. I miss Mommy, she said. She's not crazy. She's strong. The judge ruled. Temporary joint custody, pending evaluation. Mrs. Patterson, she warned, keep your focus on your daughter, not visions. Mark glared as we left, but Emily ran to me, hugging tight. I knew you'd fight, she whispered. I held her, tears falling, but the victory was fragile. The world was tilting faster, and I had to shield her, visions or not. Evil doesn't announce itself with horns and a pitchfork. It walks in polished shoes, smiles for the cameras, and owns the room. Winter 2019 into 2020, the world didn't pause. The 10-zone plan rolled out. UN press conferences, sleek graphics showing regions from North America to Southeast Asia. Economic stability, they promised, but X lit up with dread. 10 horns, Daniel 7. It's here. Pastor Jim's sermons grew urgent, our study group swelling. 20 now, cramped in the basement, Bibles open. Then he appeared. March 2020, CNN broke the story. A man named Elias Kane, 38, rising from nowhere. European diplomat, tech billionaire. A face carved for trust. Dark hair, sharp jaw, eyes that held you. He brokered the Israel deal. Now pitched as phase 1 of global unity. We're fractured, he said in a speech, voice smooth as silk. 10 zones, one vision, peace, prosperity, survival. I froze, coffee cup halfway to my mouth. Those eyes, too familiar, too piercing. The horn's eyes. He'll come as a hero, Jesus had said. I grabbed my phone, texting Pastor Jim. It's him. Could be, he replied. Watch close. Kane's rise was meteoric. By summer, he chaired the Global Stability Council. 3 leaders sidelined in a restructuring that smelled like a coup. X threads exploded. 3 horns uprooted, check. He pushed digital IDs, mandatory now, tied to bank accounts, food vouchers. Security, he called it, smiling on every screen. Atlanta felt it. Lines at stores, scanners rejecting cash. Protests crushed by riot gear. Emily, back halftime, asked, why's everyone mad? Things are changing, I said, brushing her hair. Not all good. She nodded, too wise for 9. Mark softened too. Joint custody held, and he stopped fighting my talk. World's a mess, he admitted one night, dropping her off. Maybe you're onto something. July 2020, Kane visited. Crowds cheered. Flags waved, a savior's welcome. I watched stomach churning as he shook hands, promised jobs, ended wars. Miracles, Jesus had warned. On X, a pastor posted, 2 Thessalonians 2 verse 9, signs and wonders. This is him. That night I dreamed the horn grew, Cain's face atop it, laughing as cities burned. I woke, gasping, Jesus's voice clear. Know him. The Antichrist wasn't coming. He was here. Freedom's a lie when you can't eat without bowing. I saw it coming, but living it was hell. 2021 slammed us hard. Cain's system tightened, digital IDs became life keys, branded on wrists or phones. No key, no food, no gas, no rent. Stores turned away cash, banks froze accounts. Efficiency, Cain said, his face on billboards, calm and certain. Can't buy, can't sell. Atlanta cracked. Riots nightly, churches raided, resistors vanishing. Pastor Jim's group went underground, meeting in Ruth's basement. It's the mark, Earl growled, rolling up his sleeve. No key, just skin. Revelation 13. I resisted too. My life key sat unclaimed, a plastic card in a drawer. Work fired me, company policy, and I scraped by on savings, bartering with neighbors. Emily stayed with Mark Moore, his key keeping her fed. You're starving her, he snapped one day, dropping her off. She's fine, I said, but my fridge was bare. Guilt gnawed, her thin cheeks my stubborn faith. Summer 2021, Cain broke the treaty. Live from Jerusalem, he strode into a rebuilt temple. News called it cultural unity, and declared, peace needs a new God. Me. Statues rose, his face carved in stone. Abomination of desolation. Daniel 9 verse 27. X shut down dissent. Accounts banned, voices silenced. Persecution hit. Pastor Jim disappeared. Rumors said prison or worse. Ruth hosted alone, her eyes hollow. They're martyrs now, she whispered, showing a photo. Earl beaten, gone. I clutched Emily tighter that night, her questions sharp. Why's everyone dying? To stop him, I said, voice breaking. But we won't. Fall 2021, the Great Tribulation began. Earthquakes split highways, storms drowned coasts. Cain's forces hunted us. I dreamed of Jesus, his voice firm. Hold fast. The mark spread, but I held out, a rebel in a world bowing low. When the end comes, you don't run. You stand, even if it's just you and a kid against a beast. 2022 to 2024 blurred into terror. Cain's reign hardened. 10 zones locked, dissenters executed, skies dark with ash. Atlanta was a ghost town. Half fled, half marked, the rest hiding. I moved us to a cabin in the North Georgia mountains, Mark reluctantly joining after his key failed to shield him from raids. You were right, he said, voice hollow, Emily between us. Ruth's group shrank. 5 left, Bibles smuggled, prayers whispered. News leaked through ham radios. Cain's miracles, water from rock, skies parting, fooled millions. Signs and wonders. His troops scoured, seeking traitors. Us. Spring 2024, they found us. Drones buzzed, boots crunched, a megaphone blared. Surrender or burn. Mark grabbed a rifle, useless but brave. Take Emily, he said, shoving her to me. Go. We ran, forest swallowing us, gunfire cracking behind. Mark didn't follow. His scream cut short, and I choked on sobs, pulling Emily deeper. Daddy, she whimpered. He's with us, I lied, clutching her. We hid in a cave, days bleeding into weeks, scavenging berries, praying. The radio crackled one night, Cain's voice. 3 years left. Bow or die. Half the 7 years gone, the worst ahead. Emily grew quiet, tough, my little warrior. Will Jesus come? She asked, eyes old beyond 10. Yes, I said, certain. He promised. Late 2024, the sky split, lightning, trumpets, a roar no drone could match. I'll return, he'd said. I held Emily, watching, waiting. The last stand wasn't surrender, it was hope. The end isn't the end. It's a beginning, brighter than the dark ever dared to dream. March 16, 2025, 7 years from my crash, the date burned in my soul. The cave was our bunker, Emily and I huddled, the world outside a war zone. Cain's reign peaked, cities razed, millions marked, his voice on every wave. I am all. Then it came, a sound not of earth but heaven. Trumpets blared, the sky tore open, light flooding so pure it hurt. Emily gasped. Mommy, look! He descended, Jesus, not the gentleman of my vision, but a king fierce and radiant, sword in hand. Every eye will see. Cain's forces froze, his miracles dwarfed. The ground shook, the marked wailed, and a shout, "It is done!" shattered the air. The rapture hit, believers rose, light pulling them skyward. Ruth, alive somewhere, soared. I felt it, a tug, but stayed Emily with me. "Not yet," I whispered, trusting. Cain fell, his empire dust, the stone of Daniel 2 striking true. The mountain grew, golden, eternal, a city unfurling, no tears, no graves. My kingdom, Jesus had promised. He stood before us, eyes soft now, Emily running to him. "You held fast," he said, lifting her. Mark appeared, resurrected, whole, hugging us both. "Sorry," he said, tears falling. "I see now." The dawn broke. No pain, no goodbyes, just us together in a world remade. No more death, Revelation 21 sang. I looked at Jesus, his voice my anchor. Well done. The 9 minutes had led me here through dark to light to forever.